expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Flintshire, the A55 is partly blocked eastbound where a vehicle caught fire between junctions 37 and 38 towards the Post House roundabout, causing queues. In Norfolk, the A47 is partly blocked by an accident at Hodingham, causing delays each way between Norwich and Dereham, and the A47 is partly blocked eastbound just after the A146 near Norwich after an accident causing delays. In the West Midlands, there's a lane closure on Birmingham New Road southbound at Tipton Road. In Dudley after an accident. On the M5 in Worcestershire, there's a lane closed southbound just after junction 7, the Worcester and Evesham turn after an accident. In Oxfordshire on the A34, there's a lane closed southbound at the Pear Tree interchange at Oxford after an accident causing queues. In Wiltshire, the A361 is closed northeast of Swindon between Highworth and Inglesham after an accident yesterday lunchtime. And the M27 in Hampshire is partly blocked westbound by an accident at junction 12 at Portsmouth causing delays.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
I do think that there is extremities in how this has been approached with, you can't eat kebabs anymore. The Climate Change Committee isn't talking about banning meat. It's talking about reducing meat, perhaps having some incentives for plant-based diets. It's talking about doing small changes, not phasing out everything, doing small changes to move to a net zero future, a more sustainable future.
How can me not having a large dollar combat, I don't know, China opening one coal-fired power station a week? Come on, this is pointless.
Well, there is other things that have been advised beyond just, reducing our meat consumption. There's things around the tax around flying and aviation, producing less fossil fuel imports and switching to more renewable power, upgrading the grid. There's a lot of other advisories collectively that moves us towards a net zero future. There is a few, of course, we can go down the route of, they can't eat the kebab anymore, but there's far more other things at play than just the kebab meat.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump, that man again, is just laughing at all this. Drill, baby, drill. You're not telling me that his cabinet are going to chow down on some quinoa. This is a red meat country leading the way, and if we had half a brain about us, we'd be drilling ourselves.
I come from an energy industry background. I work for a data intelligence company, Mapstand, as well. And what we are seeing is that what's happening in America is actually quite short-term thinking. It's not long-term thinking. Whereas in places in China, you're seeing a lot of innovation and green innovation because there is a huge economic opportunity.
Yeah, because they're selling it all to the West and polluting their atmosphere. We're offshoring our carbon footprint, and they're selling the solar panels back to us because we're the mugs.
We're also able to be the producers and also change our own energy so that we can also compete.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Morning, it is 9:30 on Tuesday the 18th of March, live across the UK, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, net zero, fantasy. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has called the net zero 2050 target impossible, and she was heckled by climate activists last night.
Today we honour Margaret Thatcher. Not just...
Yes, Kemi Badenoch has managed to get a few front pages from this announcement, but is it going to be enough to get any sort of momentum back from Reform, who seem to have it at the moment?
Net zero big cheese. The government is hiring a new low-carbon chief with an annual salary £255,000. Want a new job, Bev?
Yeah, don't mind if I do. Major welfare reforms. People claiming sickness benefits will face more reassessment as the government will today set out their plans to slash the welfare bill.
Airport changes. Holidaymakers returning to Britain will be able to skip passport queues by using facial recognition scanners. Is this Big Brother? Does this worry you?
Bloated Britain, millions of people could be summoned to their GP for an annual weigh-in and waist measurements check to tackle obesity. Would you like to take part in that?
No, I'd just like to see a GP. And is gay society in danger? The Doctor Who author Russell T Davies has warned gay people are in the greatest danger he's ever seen after Donald Trump's election. We're going to have a debate on that.
And the pothole plague, the repair backlog in England and Wales reaches a shocking new high of £17 billion. How bad are the potholes where you live? Let us know.
One pothole is filled every 18 seconds on Britain's roads, and that's been happening for the last 10 years, and there's still a repair backlog of £17 billion.
And the last surviving pilot who fought in the Battle of Britain, Group Captain John Paddy Hemingway, has died at the grand age of 105. So today we're going to hear about cuts in disability benefit and cuts in the benefits bill. I pretty much broadly agree with. But on the same day, we've been reading about how much money civil servants have been spending on government credit cards. Your money.
And the good news is they are being clamped down upon. So these MPs and civil servants will have to apply now to use these credit cards for over a certain amount. But what they've been getting away with makes my blood boil.
I'll just give you one example. They spent in a shoe shop in Barbados last year £2,500 of your money. What did you make? How does that make you feel? We'd like to know what you think.
That raises so many questions. Who needed shoes in Barbados?
And who signed it off? Why couldn't they wear sandals or flip-flops? It's called a hot beach island. GBNews.com/your say. It's not funny, but sometimes we have to laugh at these things because you literally couldn't make it up. Here's Katie Bowen with your news.
Bev, Andrew, thank you and good morning. Your latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. The government is set to unveil major welfare reforms today, with restrictions on some sickness and disability benefits to be announced. Reports suggest that Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall could slash £5 billion of welfare payments. Downing Street has said that there is, quote, a moral and an economic case for an overhaul of the system, adding that it would put the welfare system back on a more sustainable path. While some Labour backbenchers have voiced concerns over potential changes to the personal independence payment, the main disability benefit. We'll keep you updated on the Work and Pension Secretary's announcements throughout the day. The Ministry of Justice has confirmed to GB News today that it has triggered an emergency measure to use police cells to hold prisoners as jails in England and Wales reach capacity. A spokesman for the Ministry of Justice said this morning that the government had inherited a prison system in crisis. Operation Safeguard has now been triggered to, what the government say, help manage temporary capacity measures. The government say that they're working on 14,000 new prison places and that HMP Millsyke will open in a few weeks' time. To the Middle East, where Hamas said a short time ago that communications with mediators on implementing a Gaza ceasefire deal are ongoing after Israel launched strikes on Gaza overnight. Palestinian health authorities have said that at least 326 people are dead and dozens injured. Strikes were reported in multiple locations across the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military said strikes would continue for as long as necessary and would extend beyond airstrikes, meaning Israeli ground troops could resume fighting. The news comes as Foreign Secretary David Lammy said yesterday that Israel had committed a breach of international law for the first time since the conflict began in Gaza. Net zero by 2050 is impossible. That's according to Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch, who is set to launch a policy renewal process for the party today. The Tory party leader is aiming to confront what she calls the real problems, such as net zero and energy, adding that the target to reach net zero emissions by 2050 cannot be achieved without a drop in living standards. Speaking ahead of her speech, Kemi Badenoch explained the policy.
Climate change requires a response. But that response cannot bankrupt us, otherwise we will not deliver it. And that response needs to be one that the whole world follows, not just the UK. And one of the things that I'll be talking about later today is the fact that we have decarbonised faster than any other country in the developed world. But people aren't following us, and we are deindustrialising. We're getting poorer and having more expensive energy bills as a result. Families are having to pay so much more. Businesses are closing because they can't afford electricity prices. And we've got to do something about that.
You don't. And the last surviving pilot who fought in the Battle of Britain, Group Captain John Paddy Hemingway, has died, aged 105. Group Captain Hemingway passed away peacefully yesterday, the Royal Air Force said. He was part of the group known as the Few, who defended the UK from the large-scale assault by the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe. The RAF said Group Captain Hemingway's squadron shot down 90 enemy aircraft during an 11-day period in May 1940. The Prince of Wales has paid tribute to Mr Hemingway this morning, saying, "We owe so much to Paddy and his generation for our freedoms today. Their bravery and sacrifice will always be remembered. We shall never forget them." Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Bev and Andrew.
Very good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Now, you might be thinking of going to the shops today. I don't know. What have you got on your shopping list today? A trolley full of food for the week. Maybe the kids need a new school uniform. Maybe you need a new pair of shoes for work. Well, this story is going to make your blood boil.
So, as part of the clampdown on spending, welfare bill, the government is frozen 20,000 credit cards which were being used by civil servants of varying degrees of seniority. And it's because in the last financial year, they ran up a bill of £675 million. You could build a reasonably small hospital for £600 million. £675 million. The examples are going to make your blood boil.
So these are called government procurement cards, and there are 20,000 still in use, but they're going to be frozen this week. So well done, Labour government, for having a look at this. But you are not scot-free here.
No.
Let me give you a few examples. October 2023, there were... Oh, sorry, I've lost it now. Oh, here we go. £2,493 spent at a fashionable shoe shop in Barbados.
Why do civil servants need to spend £2,500, they're working on behalf of the government and the taxpayer, on shoes in Barbados? Who signed that off? Who signed it off?
I don't understand. 2023, January, again, under the Tories, £673, which isn't a large figure, but it is money that you and I have given them.
It is if you're struggling to pay your energy bill.
Well, guess what they spent that on? A website that sells life-size cardboard cutouts of Harry Styles and the Spice Girls.
Ridiculous. And then there was the money spent on £814 in a retro computer shop. And that money was spent by the Prison and Probation Service.
A shop that
prisons
sells...
are overcrowded, and we're spending nearly £1,000 on a retro computer.
So that was basically on computer games. Yeah, I didn't know it was exactly. The prison service.
Yeah, Prison and Probation Service. So what's that for? Is that to keep the prison warders, keep them amused? But here's the funny thing. So doing the media round today is Pat McFadden. He's the Cabinet Office Minister. He's in charge of a lot of the spending, and he's rightly suspended the 20,000 cards. His own department, since he's been in the Cabinet, spent £1,820, nearly £2,000, on a Learn About the Value of Money course. I'm sorry. Why did they have to spend £2,000 on that? What value of money is in spending nearly £2,000? We're laughing, but it's not funny, is it? It's an outrage. When today, at 12:30, the Work and Pension Secretary, Liz Kendall, is going to announce, in my view, long overdue cuts to the welfare bill, which has gone through the roof. But some people will get caught in this who don't deserve to be hurt. £2,000 on a value for money course.
And this is the one as well that gets me. Cabinet Office in November, so this is under Labour. Guess how much they spent on Nespresso coffee pods in 1 month? £750 on coffee pods in a month. Again, people will say, well, that's ridiculous, Beverly. They spend billions on hospitals. Why are you bothered about 750 quid? Well, if you look after the pennies, the pounds will look after themselves.
They do. And it also shows it is the cavalier approach to money which isn't theirs. Because it's not their money, it's your money, and I think it's outrageous. We want to know what you think about it. Now, the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, says her party's previous target, remember, they enshrined it in law, by the way, the Tories, but of reaching net zero by 2050 is impossible. About time.
Well, her position has drawn criticism from environmental groups, of course, and also some people within her own party. But with war breaking out all over the world, is this the best that Tories can come up with?
Let's speak to our very own political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, it's got her on the front pages, and that's quite something for Kemi Badenoch, because it's quite difficult if you lead a party of 120 MPs to get anyone to listen to anything you say, but it's made the front of the Mail, the Telegraph, the Times, and having environmental protesters shouting and screaming at her won't do her any harm.
Yes, exactly. Andrew, you've stolen the exact words that I was about to begin with, which were that it has made the front pages, and that is something that the Conservatives find it very hard to do at the moment. Kemi Badenoch, since she became leader, has made news, things at the top of my head. One was that she liked to eat steak at lunch, which set out all sorts of chat about that, and also that she thought maternity pay was excessive, something she tried to row back on. So I think that they'll be delighted with these front pages. But yes, she's making a speech later this morning unveiling the Conservative Party's policy renewal programme. Basically, she wants to take her time to look slowly and carefully at things to come up with policies going forward for the election in 4 years' time. Of course, Sir Keir Starmer took a similar sort of steady as she goes approach with reinventing the Labour Party. That paid off for him. But the problem for Kemi Badenoch is that they have got reform to the right of them nipping at their heels and stealing pretty much all the momentum at the moment. So, yeah, worth saying, this pledge, this net zero by 2050 that's been written into law, a Conservative policy by Theresa May. And bear in mind, too, that Kemi Badenoch, served in those governments and was pretty much all for it. But, she is right in saying that there was never a detailed plan put in place to meet this target. They picked a date, they put it into law. They didn't really think about how they were going to get there because, of course, a very, very long way off. So she's now saying that it cannot be done without a serious drop in our living standards or by bankrupting us. So Rishi Sunak a couple of weeks ago suggested that this target should be ditched. She hasn't actually said that, but it's certainly on the table. But as with everything with the Conservatives, look, they had 14 years in office. Now she's attacking Ed Miliband, understandably. She says that he is spending his time serving up dollops of lofty rhetoric. We know that our energy bills, electricity particularly, some of the highest in the world, largely because of environmental taxes that we have to pay. So getting a little bit of momentum, but is it going to make a dint on reforms poll ratings? I suspect not.
All right, Catherine, that's Catherine Forster, our political correspondent in Westminster. Now, up next, one pothole is being filled in every 18 seconds, and that's been the case every day for the last 10 years in England and Wales. Do you know, I don't believe that figure, actually. I just don't.
Are you questioning the veracity of our producers' research?
No, I know the research, but I know it would have come from some rich, wretched government body. The cost is enormous, because the fact is, they're not potholes anymore, they're craters. They are.
We're going to go through some of the figures with you as well. It will blow your mind. First of all, let's have a look what the weather's doing in Europe.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations forecast.
Plenty of sunshine through the middle of the week for Italy and Croatia. Some chilly winds blowing across Greece and Turkey. Strong winds and more rain to come for Spain and Portugal. Some places here could see a month's worth of rain over the next day or so. Some of that showery rain affecting the Pyrenees and the south of France. Much of Italy dry and sunny. Plenty of sunshine over the Greek islands, but that northerly wind will be bringing a chill. But temperatures will be recovering slowly in Santorini over the next few days.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
What's your take on this then? Because my understanding is that you feel a bit disadvantaged as a result of the CGI characters here.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's taken away from people like myself who are professional actors, and these roles are made specifically for us. You know, we've got dwarfism, and it can boost our career, make money to pay for our families, and it's just an opportunity that's taken away from us because they're afraid of stereotyping or being derogatory, which is absolutely not.
Yeah, and this is not just in this film, it's actually happening quite regularly, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, because it came out a few years ago with Peter Dinklage saying that it was being stereotyping, having dwarfs playing dwarfs for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And it's really wrong for people to say that. He's made his career, he started off doing that, and he's made a very big career out of it, and you have to start somewhere, and I think this is a big stepping stone for a lot of people with dwarfism.
Yeah, and look, I suppose in any acting, in a way, like, if someone is playing the character of a very tall person in a biopic, you would presumably pick a very tall person.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't really see why it's that controversial.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, it's absolutely pointless. I don't know what they're trying to get at, but I think it's this woke culture. They're afraid of upsetting someone, and, if we didn't want to do it, we wouldn't do it, but it's very well paid, it's a lot of fun, and it's what we love to do.
And you have actually been in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs?
Yeah,
previously.
I've been in it twice for pantomime.
Fantastic. And that was you, and you just enjoyed that. I mean, that was presumably that gave work to quite a lot of actors with dwarfism.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so many actors around the UK and around the world that do it, and it's so much fun. The kids have a great experience, and it's really important for them to be educated, because then they understand that there's different people with types of dwarfism, so they're not afraid when they see someone like that, because some people grow up and they're like, well, what's up with that person? But they start to understand the differences.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Bev and Andrew. Now, no doubt you will see it with your very eyes every time you go out on the road. You'll particularly notice it if you are cycling. We have a ridiculous number of potholes on our roads. There's all sorts of theories as to why that is. Electric cars are heavier, the weather change perhaps, we've got more rain, more hot weather. And this is the cost. This is what we're looking at, the extortionate cost of fixing the backlog of potholes. 2019 to 2020, if we'd fix them all, it'd be 11 billion quid. Now, 24 to 25, 16 billion pounds. In 5 years, gone up 5 billion extra. £1 billion extra a year we would need to fill in all the potholes. Let us know if you're seeing that at home. gbnews.com/your say.
And I think part of the problem, actually, Bev, is not so much the weather. I think it's just local councils have cut their pothole road maintenance budget. We're going to get the latest now from GB News reporter Steve Bennett, who is in East Cheshire this morning, where they've got a major problem with their potholes. Steve.
That's right. Good morning to you both. Cheshire East has come up top of the list with potholes open cases at a staggering 17,191 open cases of pothole reports in this area, with the oldest open case going back to March 2020, it's reported, which is incredible. And you join us here on the A530, which is notorious as one of the worst roads in East Cheshire, littered with potholes. But I must say, quite a few of them have actually been repaired recently, which is a relief for these locals. several reports of motorists having to swerve out of the way into the opposing traffic to avoid these potholes. And as you mentioned there, if you're a cyclist or if you ride a motorbike, particularly tricky for you. And when it rains, you can't see those potholes, and fatalities are a potential on roads just like this all over the country. Now, it comes as the government has pledged £1.6 billion to local authorities to fix these potholes, with Cheshire East themselves getting £21 million of that to fix all their carriageways, including the potholes that we've spoken about. With Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander saying that Britain's roads have been littered with potholes for far too long, and it's time to fix them once and for all. It's become like an obstacle course out on Britain's roads to navigate these potholes. Now, this road, as I mentioned, the A530, it's a busy A road, and it actually leads from North Wales to Bentley HQ. Bentleys are made in Crewe, and imagine buying yourself a brand new Bentley, coming out on this road and hitting a pothole. You would not be pleased with that. Now, some facts for you. I know you've already thrown a few in, but 52% of Britain's roads have less than 15 years of life left in them, and the average road is only resurfaced once every 93 years. Isn't that incredible? And the AA have released some statistics that say that the average motorist spends up to £500 a year on average repairing their car from pothole damage, and 96% of those same motorists say fixing those potholes is absolutely paramount for them. Incredible stats. And as we said earlier on, one pothole is fixed every 18 seconds on Britain's roads. That's been happening for 10 years, and there's still a backlog of £17 billion worth of repairs that need doing. Incredible when you think about it. We've all faced it on Britain's roads when you're going up and down the carriageways, potholes everywhere, and this bit in particular in Cheshire East has proved a real issue for locals, and we'll try and speak to some of those locals later on so they can tell us exactly how they feel about this road and the roads in general. So potholes are a real issue for Britain. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. You've been getting in touch at home about potholes. Gary says, Bev, I've just brought the missus for surgery in Birmingham. I hope the missus is all right, Gary. And he says, I can't believe it. There are fewer craters on the moon. I think he's talking about the journey there, not his missus. And G. Lee said, pothole Britain, Labour working hard for a fourth world Britain. That's what it feels like, isn't it? Ant has said, a lane where I live was resurfaced less than a year ago and has already got potholes in it.
It's because they don't fix them properly. They do it on the cheap.
That's right. Councils should have a, 3-year warranty for those fixing the roads.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
So that if any holes appear in that time, the fixers should have to fix it for free. Also, why aren't the fixers using plastic in the tarmac like they do in countries abroad? Doing so will get rid of plastic waste and also prevent potholes from appearing. But that would take imagination and ambition rather than just doing the very basics, which is what it feels like, unfortunately, too many councils do.
It's a terrible reflection on Britain, the state of our roads. It's a terrible reflection.
And PW says the same potholes, don't just patch them. They're doing a poor job. The roads need resurfacing.
Now, still to come up, the Doctor Who writer Russell T Davies says that gay people in this country are in danger after Donald Trump's election win. We're going to be debating that. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Cracking day today if you like spring sunshine. It will still feel quite fresh, certainly a chilly start, and particularly in the wind in the southwest. There'll be another frost overnight tonight. Quite cloudy to begin with across parts of Northern Ireland and some cloud across the southwest, but for many it is a sparkling day of sunshine. A brisk wind, though, across the southwest of England, South Wales, and quite a breeze, too, on some of these North Sea coasts, which could produce quite cloudy conditions across Shetland. But for most, it's fine, dry, lots of sunshine. Temperatures just ticking up a little, double digits for many inland, but it'll feel cooler on those North Sea coasts, just 7 or 8 Celsius. here pretty quickly tonight. Those temperatures will be dropping back down again under largely clear skies. We'll keep a fair bit of cloud and a bit of a breeze across Shetlands, but elsewhere we will have generally clear skies well into the night, and that will allow those temperatures to start falling pretty rapidly. But generally, a fine night to come. A good night for stargazing across the Midlands, Wales and southwest England. Still a bit of a breeze across the southwest. That will ease slowly through the night, but will still be there. Temperatures will fall away under those clear skies, as I mentioned, so you can see that blue hue, the frost. The breeze in the southwest should help to keep the temperatures up here, but elsewhere will be down to freezing or a touch below, even in towns and cities and rural spots well below, -6, -7 in a few places. So a frosty start tomorrow morning. But again, for many, it's going to be a fine and dry day with plenty of sunshine. Perhaps a bit more cloud tomorrow, particularly in the far southwest, where the winds will be a touch lighter, but it's just a small chance of a shower here. Again, the risk of a bit of low cloud at times over the Northern Isles, but generally it's another fine day tomorrow with more blue sky. And after that frosty start, turning a little milder, and temperatures will continue to tick up through the rest of this week.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Flintshire, the A55 is blocked eastbound where a vehicle caught fire between junctions 37 and 38 towards the Post House roundabout near Chester. There are queues from junction 36. In Norfolk, the A47 is partly blocked by an accident at Hodingham, causing delays each way between Norwich and Dereham, and an accident on the A47 eastbound just south of Norwich after the A146 at Trouse Newton, causing delays. On the M5 in Worcestershire, there's a lane closed southbound just after junction 7 at Evesham after an accident, with queues from junction 6 at Worcester. In Wiltshire, the A361 is closed northeast of Swindon after an accident. The M40 in Buckinghamshire is blocked northbound by an accident between junctions 1 and 1A towards the M25, causing queues. The M25 in Essex is blocked anti-clockwise by an accident between junctions 30 and 29 from the A13 to the A127, causing queues. And the M27 in Hampshire is partly blocked westbound by an accident at junction 12 at Portsmouth.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You could be the next big winner of the Great British Giveaway, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. Cash that you'll be able to spend on anything you like. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag, and not one, but 2 sought-after designer watches, so you can style it out this spring. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good morning. It's 10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 18th of March, live across the world. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pierce and Bev Turner.
So it's a fantasy net zero. That's according to the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch, who used to embrace it when she was in the Tory cabinet. She says the net zero 2050 target is impossible, as she was heckled by climate activists last night.
Today we honour Margaret Thatcher. not just.
And she did say today we honour Margaret Thatcher. Major welfare reforms. People claiming sickness benefits are going to face more reassessments as the government will today set out their plan to slash the welfare bill.
Airport changes. Holidaymakers returning to Britain could skip passport queues by using facial recognition scanners. Does that worry you or does that please you?
And bloated Britain, millions of you could be summoned to your GP for an annual weigh-in and waist measurement check to tackle obesity. Has your weight got anything to do with the government?
And is it tough being gay in Britain? The Doctor Who writer Russell T Davies says gay people are, quote, in the greatest danger he's ever seen after Donald Trump's election. Well, we're going to debate that.
And the pothole plague. The repair backlog in England and Wales has reached a shocking new high of £17 billion. How bad are the potholes where you live?
And the last surviving pilot who fought in the Battle of Britain, Group Captain John Paddy Hemingway, who was shot down 4 times, has died at the age of 105. Amazing age, wasn't it?
Great.
And you know, one of the times when his plane came down, his parachute didn't work, and he landed in a tree and carried on. I mean, he had a great survival gene. I just don't think they make them like that anymore.
That is why we need to tell those stories
to
the next generation.
And by the time the Battle of Britain ended, he was still only 21, and then he had another 4 years of flying in the Second World War. Say that to our snowflake kids. Can they imagine what he did?
Yeah.
Where would we have been without people like John?
Absolutely. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbnews.com/your say. First, though, the very latest news with Katie Bowen.
Bev, Andrew, thank you and good morning. Your latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. The government is set to unveil major welfare reforms today, with restrictions on some sickness and disability benefits to be announced. Reports suggest that Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall could slash £5 billion of welfare payments. Downing Street has said that there is, quote, a moral and an economic case for an overhaul of the system, adding that it would put the welfare system back on a more sustainable path. Well, some Labour backbenchers have voiced concerns over potential changes to the personal independence payment, the main disability benefit. We'll keep you updated on the Work and Pension Secretary's announcements throughout the day. The Ministry of Justice has confirmed to GB News today that it has triggered an emergency measure to use police cells to hold prisoners as jails in England and Wales reach capacity. A spokesman for the Ministry of Justice said this morning that the government had inherited a prison system in crisis. Operation Safeguard has now been triggered to, what the government say, help manage temporary capacity pressures. The government said they are working on 14,000 new prison places and that HMP Millsike will open in a few weeks' time. To the Middle East, where Hamas said a short time ago that communications with mediators on implementing a Gaza ceasefire deal are ongoing after Israel launched strikes on Gaza overnight. Palestinian health authorities have said that at least 326 people are dead and dozens injured. Strikes were reported in multiple locations across the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military said strikes would continue for as long as necessary and would extend beyond airstrikes, meaning Israeli ground troops could resume fighting. The news comes as Foreign Secretary David Lammy said yesterday that Israel had committed a breach of international law for the first time since the conflict in Gaza began. Net zero by 2050 is impossible. That's according to Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch, who is set to launch a policy renewal process for the party today. The Tory party leader is aiming to confront what she calls real problems, such as net zero and energy, adding that the target to reach net zero emissions by 2050 cannot be achieved without a drop in living standards. Speaking ahead of her speech, Kemi Badenoch explained the policy.
Climate change requires a response. But that response cannot bankrupt us, otherwise we will not deliver it. And that response needs to be one that the whole world follows, not just the UK. And one of the things that I'll be talking about later today is the fact that we have decarbonised faster than any other country in the developed world. But people aren't following us, and we are deindustrialising. We're getting poorer and having more expensive energy bills as a result. Families are having to pay so much more. Businesses are closing because they can't afford electricity prices. And we've got to do something about that.
US President Donald Trump will speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin this afternoon in an attempt to convince his counterpart to accept a ceasefire in Russia's war with Ukraine. President Trump said he was looking forward to the call with the Russian president after what he said had been positive talks between Putin and US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. The White House said President Trump is willing to impose more sanctions on Russia if his phone call with Vladimir Putin does not go well. That comes as the European Union Foreign Affairs Chief is set to meet with David Lammy and John Healey today to discuss increasing economic pressure on Russia and supporting Ukraine. French riot police have begun a large-scale eviction of more than 400 migrants who have been occupying a theatre in central Paris. As officers began in the early hours of this morning, hundreds of demonstrators gathered to protest the eviction. Migrants have occupied the Gate Lyrique for more than 3 months. The King and Queen will meet Pope Francis during a royal tour of Italy in April, Buckingham Palace have confirmed. Their Majesties will carry out a state visit to the Holy See, the government of the Roman Catholic Church in the Vatican, despite the Pontiff's continued hospital treatment for double pneumonia. The tour will also include state visits to Rome and Ravenna. And the last surviving pilot who fought in the Battle of Britain, Group Captain John Paddy Hemingway, has died, aged 105. Group Captain Hemingway passed away peacefully yesterday, the Royal Air Force said. He was part of the group known as the Few who defended the UK from the large-scale assault by the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe. The RAF said Group Captain Hemingway's squadron shot down 90 enemy aircraft during an 11-day period in May 1940. The Prince of Wales has paid tribute to Mr Hemingway this morning, saying we owe so much to Paddy and his generation for our freedoms today. Their bravery and sacrifice will always be remembered. We shall never forget them. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Bev and Andrew.
This is Britain's Newsroom, live across Britain on GB News with Andrew and Bev.
Renewal. Did you forget for a minute who we were and what we're doing? We're here anyway. Deep breath. Right. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch says that her party's previous target of reaching net zero by 2050 is impossible.
And just to say, this was made legally written into law by Theresa May in one of the many idiotic things she did as Prime Minister. So she's distancing herself from that, even though she backed it when she was in cabinet.
Boris Johnson was very on board with all this as well, wasn't he?
He certainly was, not least because his wife Carrie was a great ardent environmentalist. So she says it's unrealistic, but she hasn't formally ditched the commitment.
Well, it's very easy, isn't it, when you're in opposition to say things like this are unrealistic, but you're under a lot of pressure to go along with it when you're actually in power. Let's see what former Conservative MP Jonathan Gullis makes of it. Jonathan, is that kind of rather cynical assessment perhaps quite accurate, that actually when you're in opposition you can say all sorts of things that might be unpopular on the global stage, but when you're in government you have to go along with all the 2050, 2030 net zero nonsense?
No, I think you're fair in your cynicism, and I think many voters will be, which is why we have to be serious. And as Andrew and yourselves have pointed out, there needs to be a clear commitment made beyond today's headline that says that we will indeed repeal and ditch this 2050 legislation, which, as Andrew also pointed out, was some gimmick by Theresa May to try and make it look like she had some sort of legacy after her disastrous reign as Prime Minister by not enacting the will of the British people by delivering Brexit, and then being willing to do some backroom deal with Jeremy Corbyn, of all people, in that time, before finally being ousted as leader of the Conservative Party. I mean, let's be frank, we know this is going to cost around $500 billion, and we don't even know whether or not it will actually deliver the lasting energy security that we need. At the same time, where I live in Stoke-on-Trent, we're seeing ceramic manufacturers making mass redundancies or indeed shutting entirely because the net zero madness is adding all the additional costs, driving up the cost of gas as well as obviously making sure that other countries in Europe and indeed elsewhere in the world are massively subsidising in their competitors. So ultimately, it's about time we had common sense in this debate. Small nuclear and modular reactors, building homes to a high quality of standards so that therefore they're not leaking lots of heat out of them, and most importantly, making sure that we have a good energy mix, which includes coal, gas and oil.
The government would tell us that ultimately this will reduce our energy bills. Well, I'm very sceptical about that anyway, Jonathan. But in the short to medium term, i.e. this year, next year, families already struggling with the cost of living crisis are having to pay more and more energy bill for their energy bills because of this obsession with wind turbines, solar panels, and all the rest of it.
Well, Andrew, as you say, we've just seen Ed Miliband over in China, of all places, handing billions of pounds of taxpayers' money over for wind turbines. China, that's literally using slave labour, committing mass genocide of the Uyghur Muslims, and of course, will control the technology, which undermines our own national security as well, which is why it's even more absurd for Red Ed to be allowed loose with the public finances when it comes to chasing his Greta Thunberg ideology that he's so desperate to enact. And the reality is that under Labour, we've seen energy bills go up 3 times, almost around £300, the very same figure they promised it would be cut, wasting £8 billion on GB Energy, which no one understands what it can do. And even the head of GB Energy says he can't be sure when energy bills will in fact come down. It's just a complete mockery. It's just basic rhetoric. I mean, again, the Labour MPs in Stoke-on-Trent, Andrew and Bev, are saying that, oh, well, we want to go to electric furnaces when it comes to for plates and cups. Electric furnaces would mean you'd have to change the entire product in the way it's modelled and designed, and the quality wouldn't even be as good, which would further undermine our ability to have high quality manufacturing in this country. They're just not being realistic and honest. And the Conservatives, to be perfectly frank, weren't realistic or honest too with the public about what the trade-offs would be. Yes, we want energy security. Yes, we want to create things in this country and have new high-skilled jobs. Yes, we will want some wind, some solar, but we also want nuclear, which Labour seems to have paused yet again, as they did under the Blair years. We want coal, we want gas, we want oil. We need these things. Let's get baby drill up in the North Sea.
We were saying, Jonathan, that at least getting heckled has put Kemi Badenoch in the papers. She fails to cut through. We regularly point out on this show that she's rarely at the farmers' protests, a very British issue that the Conservatives should be owning. She should be sat there, frankly, on the front of a tractor waving a flag. She just isn't landing, I don't think, with the British public or gaining any kind of popularity.
Well, I think today is a big day for Kemi with the launch of these policy commissions and ultimately laying out a path for the Conservatives to try and get back into power at the next general election. And I hope that these policy commissions go well, that they are brutal, to be perfectly frank, about where we went wrong, but also are bold and ambitious about where we need to go in the future. And I think it's fair to assess that some of the policies that both Labour and Conservative are now pursuing have been in part because of the pressure from reform. And without reform, I do wonder whether enough of my Conservative colleagues, or my former colleagues, should I say, would have indeed been getting behind this. I think Kemi actually is someone who is genuinely authentic and believable on this type of issue. But there's many who sat behind her at this present moment in time who I think will be privately grumbling and moaning, but willing to probably accept it if they think it will allow them to keep their seat. And as you say, the test will be whether we can convince voters that if we were in power, we would actually deliver on the promises that we're making. And I still say, as I've said to you guys before, that I think that trust in our party is still at an all-time low, as it is with Labour, and we might do all this stuff and the voters still might well come up with the idea that they just simply will not believe us. So it's an almighty task that Kemi has, but one I do believe that with patience and with time, she can slowly get there if she's willing to be brave and bold, and more importantly, if the people around her and backing her in Parliament are willing to swallow their pride of trying to be liked on X and being popular with centrist dads and focused on what actually is more important to the people of this country.
Good line. Good. You'd be tempted to get involved with reform by the next election?
Look, I'm very lucky to know people in the Reform Party, including Nigel himself, and I have much admiration for what they're doing, ultimately because they're showing incredible amount of force when it comes to being an insurgent party. However, I've been a member of the Conservatives for 17 years. I plan to fight tooth and nail for conservatism to survive in the Conservative Party. I think I used to joke in Parliament I'm the Conservative wing of the Conservative Party. So I'll be fighting tooth and nail to support Kemi and the Conservative Party get back to where it should do. But of course, as I always say, I think that in 2-3 years' time, we'll find out whether the Conservative Party is maybe beyond repair, and maybe we'll see some sort of merger. However, I would say that once that happens, the Conservative Party as we know it and as I love it would die with it. So I hope that we don't get to that point in
Jonathan,
case.
we can never accuse you of being a centrist dad. Listen, great to see you. Thank you so much, Jonathan Gullis there. So the last surviving pilot who fought in the Battle of Britain, Captain John Paddy Hemingway, has died at the age of 105.
The Prime Minister's paid tribute thanking the courage and determination of Paddy to help bring an end to the Second World War.
The Prince of Wales issued a statement thanking Paddy for his bravery and sacrifice.
Let's talk to the military historian, Dr. Peter Caddick-Adams, who joins us now. Peter, this really is the end of an era. He is the last of the few. His war record was extraordinary. And what I find really moving is when the Battle of Britain ended, he was still only 21. What he'd gone through in those months and year.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of a very few, of course, who stepped up to the plate in 1940. Hence his generation of Spitfire Hurricane pilots who fought during July to October 1940 were known as the few. There weren't very many of them, and they were the only defence, really, we had between the Germans invading and taking over the United Kingdom. The purpose of the battle that was fought between our fighter pilots and the German Air Force was to give them superiority so they could cross the Channel and invade. Had they succeeded, you and I would be doing this interview in German.
Yeah,
we would all be speaking German. I mean, it was as that much of a razor edge, and so he's the tip of the spear, and he's the last one who's now left us.
And we're looking at these pictures here. Do we know, or do you know, sorry, Peter, how his life panned out? What did he go on to live a life of?
Well, I mean, he was a professional Air Force pilot, and he only retired from the Royal Air Force in 1969, when the film The Battle of Britain was being made, actually, that he knew and he helped a little with the technical advice on. But he spent the rest of his war in fighters. He went on to night fighting, so shooting down German bombers intruding over the United Kingdom, and eventually ended up in Italy, where he was shot down for the fourth time in 1945. So, I mean, he, talk about 9 lives. He came through it. But goodness me, I mean, the trauma that man would have gone through. And he was still only 21 at the end.
Do you think, just finally, it would be nice that there's going to be a private family funeral service, but then there's going to be a memorial service? Wouldn't it be lovely if they organised a fly-past, perhaps with a Spitfire and a Hurricane?
Well, I think that would be a lovely idea. And of course, the Battle of Britain memorial flight has been grounded since, very sadly, one of the aircraft crashed a couple of years ago. But it's just been released, and so it can now fly and is looking forward to a full season this year. So it may well be that its first appointment is a fly past for its last pilot. Who is now no more. But I mean, it's an enormous privilege to just sort of chat about him, because there are no more, and this is the stuff of myth and legend, and we can no longer now reach out and touch these valuable people and speak to them. So. We mourn their passing, but we thank goodness that they were born in the first place to defend our freedom in 1940.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. That's Dr. Peter Caddick-Adams, the military historian, talking about that remarkable man.
He married, he had 3 children, and his wife Bridget died in 1998.
Yeah.
He lived in Canada for a few years, but returned to Ireland in 2011.
And appropriately, because his nickname was Paddy, everybody called him Paddy. He died on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, wow.
How nice is
Apt,
that?
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
lived in a nursing home near Dublin since 2019.
Plenty more to come. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Martin Daubney. Weekdays from 3 p.m.
Trans police officers will be allowed to strip search women despite ongoing backlash from critics. New guidance for the National Police Chiefs Council says that biologically male staff who identify as women should be allowed to intimately search women as long as they possess a gender recognition certificate. Now, what could possibly go wrong? But some women's rights groups claim that the police had forgotten about women in their pursuit of gender ideology. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joined by the Surrey Police and Crime Commissioner, Lisa Townsend. Lisa, a delight to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much for joining us. A lot of people have very, very legitimate concerns that if you're a woman, you're in a vulnerable position, you're being searched intimately, it should be another woman who is searching you. And a trans woman, in a lot of people's eyes, isn't a woman. They're a biological man who says they're a woman. What's your take on this?
I'm afraid that this is just the latest in a long line of announcements like this from the NCC about the ability for trans police officers to search women, males essentially, to search women. We wouldn't think it was okay anywhere else, and it's not okay in policing. I think there's also another way of looking at this, which is it's not just male officers, and they are born male. We are talking about males being able to search women. It's also the other way round. It's also female officers potentially being told that they have to search a trans woman, i.e. a male who has been brought into custody. That male could have been brought into custody because he himself has been violent, and he is insisting that he is a woman and therefore, you know, there's no time to check the gender recognition certificate, but that's how he identifies, and he insists on a female officer searching him. So I think we have to look at this on both sides, and either way it can't be right.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. We're going to go to our panel in just a moment. But first of all, don't forget to enter our fabulous competition. You could win designer handbags, 2 highly sought-after designer watches and an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Here are the details.
Spring has sprung with a great British giveaway, and we're giving you the chance to splash out this season with an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash. Jet off on your dream holiday, treat yourself to something special, or just save it for a rainy day. You'll also receive 2 brand new designer watches and a Mulberry handbag, so you can really look the part this spring. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're going to be going to a Kemi Badenoch speech in just a moment, which explains the look on our
rolling my eyes. The whole Kemi Badenoch speech, please.
But you may not want to hear the speech, but it might be worth hanging on to see our excoriating take on it. Might be
I'm
one
sure
way
it'll
of
be
saying
fabulous and
It'll be
interesting.
fabulous, it'll be
Yeah.
wonderful, it'll be marvellous. She's going to change the world. Nigel Nelson is here, and Piers Pottinger is also with us. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us
we
this
want to talk
morning.
to somebody who is going to change the world, Trump.
Yes.
Speaking to Putin today.
Yep.
The carve-up of Ukraine will begin in earnest, and looks like we could be heading to a ceasefire, Piers?
Well, it's hard to predict with Trump.
Yes.
Anything could happen.
Yeah.
I think, sadly, for the people of Ukraine, it does look like a carve-up, and it also makes all this coalition of 30 countries in Europe look increasingly irrelevant.
France
I mean,
put a statement out this morning. Who's listening to what France is saying?
No, well, I mean, the Americans can't even pronounce Macron's name right. It's always Macron. It'd be macaroons. But I mean, it is genuinely sad for the people of Ukraine to see their country being carved up by two questionable leaders.
But what has got to be surely sadder is seeing hundreds of thousands of their young, innocent men being taken to their death.
Absolutely. But the question is whether Putin really is serious about peace. I mean, he's stepped up the activity in the most horrific way since these talks have happened, and Trump keeps saying we're nearly there. Well, you'd have thought there'd be some goodwill shown by Putin if he was serious. There's none of that. I think it is genuinely a very sad, it could be a very sad announcement today. And also the big question, of course, is what kind of security promises is Trump prepared to make? Or is he expecting Europe to do this rather bizarre 30-country coalition of peacekeeping troops,
10,000 troops.
Which doesn't sound to me... No, I mean, 10,000 troops is less than 1% of the fighting force of Ukraine at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's irrelevant, really. And also, with 30 different countries involved, just think of the language problem alone, let alone the military relevance to it.
At least having 10,000 NATO troops in Ukraine would be enough to deter Putin from re-attacking. So there is a benefit of doing that, but obviously we've got to worry about their safety too. There'll be British troops there. It looks like Britain and France will lead that force, should it ever happen. And without the American backstop, without their protection, they're going to be at risk.
Do you think there's any public support whatsoever, Nigel, for British troops, young men and women, going into Ukraine as a peacekeeping force? And of course, the Prime Minister says they'll be neutral. They won't be neutral. They're there to protect Ukraine from Russian military endeavours. So how neutral does that make them? They're not neutral.
No, and effectively they're NATO troops, and they're to protect Europe and NATO in a wider way.
Because we've been sucked into these wars before. Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you think there's any public support for it?
I think public support is drifting away. I tend to agree with you. However, on the other side, this is incredibly important, that there is a danger that this whole thing could escalate if it goes wrong. So the question really is where you get to, what kind of agreement you get to. I mean, just take the fact that, first of all, Putin won't accept having NATO troops within Ukraine.
They're not going to be NATO troops because...
But they belong to NATO.
Well, some of the countries involved will be NATO members, but some of the NATO members are not prepared to send troops.
No, that's right.
Georgia Meloni,
Italy is a good example.
Has made it absolutely clear.
And we make it Australian, New Zealand troops. I mean, that's
and
possible.
Canadian.
Well, Canadian is NATO, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'm not sure about Turkey.
But we do start from the position that Putin says no anyway, that he doesn't want those troops in the country. And the next thing is a question of Ukraine NATO membership. Now, if you look at sort of the borders, when the Soviet Union fell, the NATO border with Russia was 130 miles. We've then stretched that to 1,500 miles, which, of course, Putin and ordinary Russians find really quite threatening. If Ukraine joins, another 1,200 miles.
Well, they're not going to, are they? There's no... I can't think anyone apart from
I think that's right. I think you're right there. I don't think that we're saying Ukraine should, as a sovereign country, should have the right to join NATO. I think you're right, Andrew. I think that'll be at the best kicked into the long grass.
Years away, years away.
Yes.
Trump, of course, Piers, is doing what he does, America first.
Yes.
He doesn't want to be sucked into any military conflict. And Maloney, And if there's a ceasefire, the military aid is switched off, saving the taxpayer a lot of money, but also he gets his hands on some of the mineral rights.
Yes.
Good for America. They get some of the money back. That's what he's all about, America first.
Yeah, except, I mean, some of these tariffs he's introduced and the way it's going to filter back to America is actually going to be not that great for the American consumer. The prices are going to rise, they're going to feel it in their pocket. But at the moment, the euphoria surrounding the non-stop frenzy of Trump activity is doing him a lot of good. I mean, apart from this today, he's also going to release 80,000 documents on the Kennedy assassination. He's also, the judge is going to release the Prince Harry visa documents. And there was something else I think it's due to do today as well. I mean, it's just non-stop frenzy.
The pace, isn't it?
And I think the mainstream journalists in America are finding it very hard to keep up with.
Yeah, they are. So that call, just to say, the call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin will happen between 1 and 3 p.m. UK time today. So whatever comes out of that, you must stay with GB News all afternoon and all evening.
By the weekend.
It could well do. I mean, there will be definitely an announcement sometime, I would think around 6 o'clock our time, or maybe for the 10 o'clock.
Ironic, at the very time Israel is now bombing Gaza again, 250 people killed, and that was a Trump-brokered ceasefire too.
Well, let's hope for optimism. Can we have some optimism around this table? I seem to be surrounded by blokes who aren't pleased this war's ending.
The best thing is that there's no evidence of David Lammy involved in any of these talks or negotiations.
David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary.
Piers, just a story closer to home. What's this about children taking too many GCSEs, according to a review? The education being in the hands of Bridget Phillipson keeps me awake at night, frankly. So what?
Yes, I mean, I think she's the most poisonous education secretary there's been, and her mad ideology, virtually communist. She's controlled by the trade unions.
Yes, she is.
Everything she does is for the unions, certainly not for children. And she's already decimating educational standards in this country. For example, she withdrew, without any mention or formal announcement, all funding for teaching Latin in state schools. Absolutely outrageous and unforgivable. She's also some of the new legislation coming in against academies and not giving people the flexibility on the curriculum. It's not actually, I think the story in the Times was slightly misleading, the headline, because it's actually I don't think that is actually what came up. What is the real concern is the rigid new curriculum she intends to introduce at the behest of the unions and to the detriment of educational standards in this country. There's no question that Bridget Phillipson has done more damage to education in this country than any single post-war education secretary.
Do you not think that children ought to be broadly taking the same exams across the board? Otherwise, it makes it much worse. Well, they're not, because you can do the EBACs, and there's a possibility that Bridget Phillipson will get rid of EBACs and concentrate on GCSEs. And it does
what is an EBAC? I've had 3 children through school recently. I have no idea what an EBAC is.
Well, it's the baccalaureate.
Oh, is that what we now call the baccalaureate?
Yes, that's right.
And it's extremely popular with universities, the baccalaureate.
It was indeed, but the question was, if you've got some kids doing the...
Sorry to interrupt you. We're going to go...
The moment you've all been waiting for, you've been rapt attention. The leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, is about to launch her party's policy renewal programme. We are there. This is her big speech, and we will tell you what we think about it. Here she is.
Neil, thank you for that lovely introduction. We are living off the inheritance of previous generations. For 3 centuries, every era in our country's history left a better legacy for its children. The greatness of the UK was forged by the sacrifices of our ancestors. They built, they innovated, and they took tough decisions. They never assumed that prosperity was guaranteed. They made sure that it was. But that has bred an assumption that Britain will always be wealthy. We are a wealthy country, but we are becoming weaker through complacency. We are losing our resilience. We can't make things like we used to. We don't build as quickly. We are spending too much on debt, too much on welfare, and too little on defence. We are not growing like we should be. That's us. That's Canada, a little higher. That's the US growth. And up there at the top is Australia. We are not creating a legacy for the next generation. Worse than that, we are mortgaging our children's future by not recognizing that the world has changed. We're making things harder and harder for them across the board. If you look at real disposable income, or GDP per capita, or home ownership, you will see that things are stagnating or going backwards. In 1974, you could save up for a deposit to buy a house in less than 6 months. Now the average time is more than 11 years. Conservatism is about ensuring the very best of our society is preserved for the next generation, not just our own. As Roger Scruton said, conservatism is about the love of what exists, not because it is perfect, but because it is ours, and because it has grown from the lives of those who came before us. Our party has a proud history of helping the country recover from crisis. The Cold War, the economic reforms of the 1980s, the aftermath of the 2008 financial crash. It has often been our duty to shepherd our country's recovery. Yet last July, we suffered the worst defeat in our party's history. We replaced the principles-based government that brought us success with the managerialism of Labour that gave our power to quangos and courts. We assumed that we would always be wealthy, so we focused on the status quo rather than the future. And now Labour are back, and they are already making everything worse. Jobs are disappearing, taxes are rising, and growth is shrinking. They are vandalizing education, and they are completely clueless on the need for real reform of regulation. But we have to acknowledge that Labour are there because we made mistakes. And the public made it very clear that the Conservative Party needed some time away from government. Our job right now is to use that time wisely, just as Margaret Thatcher and David Cameron did in generations past. And just like the 1970s and 2000s, our party cannot shortcut our way back into office with easy answers or rushed announcements. We must develop credible plans that are based on shared conservative values: personal responsibility, citizenship, sound money, family, freedom, and so much more. Plans that show that we are thinking about tomorrow, plans that are ambitious, tackling problems with the detail they deserve, but are rooted in realism, not wishful thinking. Today, I am talking about one of the biggest ways that we are destroying our children's inheritance. Let's start by telling the truth on energy and net zero. Every single thing we do in our daily lives is dependent on cheap, abundant energy. When energy became cheap and abundant, living standards began to rise. Health and life expectancy grew. Cheap, abundant energy is the foundation of civilization as we know it today. We mess with it at our peril. But that's exactly what's been happening for 20 years. And it's now starting to cause real pain for everyday people and businesses. The cost of electricity, far too high, much higher than nearby and comparative countries, with the real possibility that it's going even higher still with environmental levies. A big chunk of our existing bills are not direct energy costs. People are struggling to pay them. Businesses, especially manufacturing businesses, are closing down, and there is no real plan for bringing costs down. That surely cannot hold. It's fantasy politics built on nothing, promising the earth and costing it too. As a society, we have been trying to do two things at once: keep energy costs down whilst reducing our impact on the environment. These are both noble aims. Conservatives like Margaret Thatcher have always been custodians of our natural environment, cherishing the forests that breathe life into our world, protecting the rivers that nourish our lands, and preserving the landscapes that inspire our souls. It is our duty to safeguard the delicate balance of nature for future generations. But the current policies the UK has been implementing are not doing this, while at the same time driving up the cost of energy. We're falling between two stools: too high costs, too little progress. And why? Because there's never, ever been a detailed plan. Ed Miliband's Climate Change Act 2008, no plan. The carbon budgets, no economic plan. And then in 2019, Parliament legislated for net zero by 2050, but no plan. A multi-trillion pound, 30-year project touching every single aspect of all our lives was decided in 90 minutes without a single vote. Of the 22 MPs who spoke that day, only 2 sounded notes of caution. I was one of them. I asked for the plan. I asked for it that day. I asked for it many days after. And I waited and waited and waited. 840 days later, a plan came. And it wasn't enough. So much so that environmental bodies are taking the government to court and winning because there isn't enough detail. We are closing down oil fields in Scotland that we need from transition from gas to renewables because the plan doesn't make sense. Let's think about it for a minute. We are already 1/6 of the way through net zero 2050 that we planned that day, and we are still arguing about what the plan is to get there. And all the politicians who gloss over the lack of a plan will be long gone when those targets are missed in the future and our children suffer. So please don't be fooled, and certainly don't be fooled by other parties' rhetoric. I remember Nick Clegg dismissing the idea of building new nuclear because it would not come online until 2022. That decision has cost us billions. Who was the Lib Dem Energy Secretary? Ed Davey, now leading the Liberal Democrats. And new parties will turn up, like Reform, who don't have real answers to our country's challenges. That's why their energy policy fell apart right after they announced it. We need a serious approach. We've got to stop pretending it's simple, and we have got to stop government by press release announcements without a policy plan. Making promises and not delivering is exactly the reason that the political class has lost trust. The only way that we can regain it is to tell the unvarnished truth. Net zero by 2050 is impossible. I don't say that with pleasure. I want a better future and a better environment for our children, but we have to get real. Anyone who has done any serious analysis knows it cannot be achieved without a significant drop in our living standards, or worse, by bankrupting us. Responsible leaders don't indulge in fictions which are going to make families poorer or mortgage their children's future. Without the rest of the world doing the same, we are making our country less safe, less secure, and less resilient. Let me give you 3 truths at the heart of net zero. First, the published plans are completely muddled. It is true that the UK has made the greatest progress on carbon emissions in the developed world. Yet we are only responsible for 1% of global emissions. Even if we hit absolute zero, we will not have net zero around the world if other countries are not following us. And they are not. They certainly will not if they see us bankrupting ourselves to get there. Our success at reducing emissions has also come at a significant cost. The highest electricity bills in the developed world. What's extraordinary is that so much of the cost of our energy bills is not directly from the wholesale cost of energy. Huge amounts are being spent on switching around how we distribute electricity, because we effectively build 2 systems now of electricity generation, one based on renewables and one not. One for when the sun shines and the wind blows, and one for when they don't. Instead of dealing with these challenges, Labour play rhetorical games, talking about missions, goals, and mistaking press releases about GB Energy for actual solutions. The real reason no one in their government is talking about a proper overall plan is that they know it would reveal just how catastrophic the actual costs will be for families, for businesses, and for our economy. Those costs include families being forced to replace perfectly functioning cars, boilers, and cookers with more expensive, less reliable versions of the same thing. The costs will mean businesses paying much more than we already are for energy. So our industrial base and manufacturing businesses get weakened even further. And it will mean our economy losing out on exploiting our own natural resources in the North Sea while being saddled with ever greater debt. That's just the first truth. Second, even where there is a plan, we are behind. Let's look at one easy example. By 2040, the Committee on Climate Change says more than half of UK homes need to rip out their boilers and replace them with a heat pump. There is no way we can do this quickly enough on that timescale. 17 million houses need to be fitted with an expensive heat pump in just 15 years. How many houses have one now? Fewer than 300,000. Because heat pumps run on a lot of expensive electricity, and it turns out many people just don't like them. But let's look at the good statistics. Last year, we saw the highest number of heat pumps ever installed in the UK, 50,000. That's the best we've ever done. So at that rate, it will take 340 years, not 15, to get to the target. And most of the 50,000 were installed with some form of government subsidy, or as I prefer to call it, taxpayers' money. There's a lot less of taxpayers' money now, and that's before government spending gets further constrained by the need to spend more on defence. This is not a criticism of green technology. I support the shift to renewables when they make energy cheaper and more secure. However, they are not a perfect solution and come with their own challenges, which brings me to the third truth. We are massively exposing ourselves to countries who do not share our values. Take solar panels. The good news is that costs have dropped in the last decade. Here's the less good news. 10 years ago, we were heavily dependent on China for all of the key components. Today, we're even more dependent. Look at the top dozen makers of solar panels. They are nearly all Chinese. That's an extraordinary dependency, given what we learned during COVID about over-reliance on these supply chains. What about wind farms? Where do we think that most production is currently? You guessed it, China, which means that they are all produced using Chinese energy. 60% of their supply comes from coal-fired power stations. They are building a new one every other week to keep up with our demand. Look at electric vehicles, all reliant on batteries to work. One country dominates production of the component parts which create them. Those three truths are why I call myself a net zero skeptic. Muddled plans, unrealistic targets and deadlines, over-reliance on China. We have got to start acknowledging what is in plain sight. Net zero makes us dangerously dependent on countries who don't share our values, and it is risking our energy security. It is time to stop pretending everything will be fine. And I'm certainly not debating whether climate change exists. It does. I badly want to leave a much better environmental inheritance for my children and for yours. But it doesn't look like we are going to get remotely close to net zero by 2050, and neither will any autocracy, not that they're trying to anyway. This is what happens when politics turns into fantasy. Maybe some of it will change, but it doesn't look promising. Ed Miliband spends all of his time making big promises, telling people he will cut household bills by £300 while having no idea how. And by the way, they've gone up by almost £300 since Labour came into office. I often say that when you want to help people, you tell them the truth. when you want to help yourself, you tell them what they need to hear. We have to tell the truth. The plans for net zero by 2050 are impossible. We have to do better than this. That's why, as part of our policy renewal, we are going to do something that Labour failed to do in 14 years of opposition. We are going to deal with reality, confront the real problems, answer the real questions, and be ready with a plan. We will cover numerous areas, but today we start on energy and net zero. To do that, our team, led by Shadow Secretary of State Claire Coutinho, will be looking at all aspects of the UK's future energy and net zero policies. Few have spent more time trying to unpack the model thinking at the heart of the net zero debate than Claire. She will be supported by Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland, Andrew Bowie, and Lord Offord. I am tasking her team with finding and working with the people who know the truth and who can come up with achievable solutions, people who can answer from experience, how we can deliver cheap and clean energy without bankrupting businesses, without eye-watering bills for households, without dependencies on hostile or unstable countries. Labour may not be interested in these questions, but we are. We are interested because, as Conservatives, we want to protect our environment. We want to secure our energy, deliver a better world for our children. Someone has to save these noble objectives from the zealots who have hijacked this agenda. The best way to deliver clean energy and a better environment is with the market. Not state diktat, not pretend statistics from vested interests or rent seekers who want to keep this fiction going for as long as possible. Telling the truth on net zero and energy is just the start of actually ensuring we leave an inheritance for the next generation. I said at my party conference speech that we were going to rewire, reprogram, and reboot the way government works so it serves the public again. Today, the Conservative Party is taking the first step in the UK's biggest policy renewal programme in 50 years. Tomorrow, my shadow cabinet will begin to do the same with many of the other problems that we see. Getting people back to work, dealing with a society that is fragmenting, not integrating, fixing healthcare, repairing the mess Labour are making right now in education, improving productivity, controlling immigration and dealing with the lawfare that stops elected officials from making democratic decisions. And there will be so much more. In the weeks ahead, I will say more on the academics, experts, business people, members from all walks of life who will help us get to the root cause of our country's problems. Our party members shape our policy, and they will be at the heart of this. They joined the Conservative Party because they want to change the country for the better. Our policy renewal will be the foundation of making that happen for the next decade. And if you are not a Conservative Party member, but like what you hear, join us. We need your support, your help, your expertise. Join us and help provide a better inheritance for our children. The party is under new leadership, and we are going to do things differently. We are serious about changing our country for the better. And the first way to do that is to realise we don't just exist to win elections. We have to know what we are winning for and what we are going to do after we win. Diagnosing the real problems, finding workable solutions, building a proper plan, then being ready to rebuild and make our country stronger again, just as we have done in generations past. Fighting for ordinary people, for the institution of the family, for business, for common sense, for less tax, less state and less interference. And finally, ensuring that our generation can leave a real and true inheritance, a better world for our children once again. Thank you.
So that was Kemi Badenoch. Speech is over. I'm sure you're all relieved at that.
If you want to carry on watching it, though, if you're not relieved and you want to watch it, please scan the QR code on the screen now, or you can head to GBN2 on YouTube. Nigel and Piers, you don't have to do that. You're still with us. We can discuss it here. Now, let's just explain to our audience. That was Kemi Badenoch. trying to inspire her teams to go away and come back with some brilliant policy ideas in every department. Was it inspiring?
No, absolutely not. I was really rather depressed after watching and listening to that. Leaders should have a vision. If you're the leader of a major party, you should have a vision of what you're trying to achieve. She has just completely abrogated that and said it's down to the members of the party to shape policy. No, it's never been that way.
Never been the case.
And it certainly isn't at the moment. So that was a completely mad thing to say. I'm afraid it summed up what's really lacking in Kemi. I mean, I think she's a decent person in many ways. I think she's intelligent in many ways. But she has no charisma. She has no vision. And she's lost the core of the Conservative voting electorate. And we all know where it's gone. It's gone to reform. And when local elections come up, I think she's going to be wiped out. The Conservatives will be wiped out. And the man with vision, Nigel Farage, will be the benefactor. I'm afraid it just showed up why the Conservatives are doing so badly. That was a absolutely terrible speech. If they have no idea what the policies are, don't get up and keep saying it.
In her defence, she talked about freedom. She said family. I think she's shied away from using the word community, but otherwise it was a reform-light pitch.
Platitudes.
Yeah, it was. I mean, but I think Piers is right. There was, she outlined a number of problems, but there were no solutions at all and no ideas about how to get to a solution. The one thing I did agree with her about was when she said we probably won't reach net zero by 2050. I think
First time someone's been honest about that, really, haven't they?
Yeah.
We've run out of time, Nigel. Don't go anywhere. Is Donald Trump making it dangerous to be gay? Find out in a minute.
We're giving you the chance to splash out this season with an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash. Jet off on your dream holiday, treat yourself to something special, or just save it for a rainy day. You'll also receive 2 brand new designer watches and a Mulberry handbag, so you can really look the part this spring. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It is 11 o'clock on Tuesday, the 18th of March, live across the UK. Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So breaking news, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has set out her policy renewal this morning.
We are not creating a legacy for the next generation. Worse than that, we are mortgaging our children's future by not recognising that the world has changed. We're making things harder and harder for them across the board.
And major welfare reforms are being unveiled today. People claiming sickness benefits will face more reassessments as the government will set out that plan to cut the welfare bill.
And how annoyed are you by potholes? The repair backlog in England and Wales has reached a shocking new high of £17 billion. How bad are they where you live?
Holidaymakers returning to Britain could skip passport queues by using facial recognition scanners. Does this worry you, or do you like the idea of it?
Hate the idea. And voted Britain, millions of people could be summoned to their GP for an annual weigh-in to tackle obesity. Whose business is it? What do you put in your mouth?
And if you're gay, are you feeling endangered? The Doctor Who and It's a Sin writer Russell T Davies says gay people are in their greatest ever danger because of Donald Trump's election. We'll debate that.
Do you feel in danger?
No.
That's it, we've done that item.
No,
Move on, we'll come up with something else.
I'm an admirer of Russell T Davies's drama. He's written some terrific stuff. I think he's lost the plot completely. Trump isn't anti-gay.
We're going to be
Anyway, and how does it affect us in this country?
Do you know what? We're going to be talking to Peter Tatchell about this, and also Lewis Oakley, who is a campaigner for gay rights. I presume it's partly to do with his anti-trans normalisation policies. One might describe it as that.
And stopping the spending on diversity training. I wish we'd stop it here immediately, overnight.
Yes, of course, yeah. gbnews.com/your say. Get in touch with us this morning. First, though, here's your news with Katie Bowen.
Bev, Andrew, thank you and good morning. Your latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. Speaking a short while ago, Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch said that her party is not creating a legacy and that the UK is becoming weaker through complacency as she launched a policy renewal programme. Ms Badenoch said that her party must develop credible plans based on Conservative values, as she labelled net zero by 2050 as impossible, adding that the target to reach net zero emissions cannot be achieved without a drop in the living standards. Kemi Badenoch outlined the policy during her speech.
A big chunk of our existing bills are not direct energy costs. People are struggling to pay them. Businesses, especially manufacturing businesses, are closing down, and there is no real plan for bringing costs down. That surely cannot hold. It's fantasy politics built on nothing, promising the earth and costing it too. But the current policies the UK has been implementing are not doing this, while at the same time driving up the cost of energy.
Elsewhere, the government is set to unveil major welfare reforms today, with restrictions on some sickness and disability benefits to be announced. Reports suggest that Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall could slash £5 billion of welfare payments. Downing Street has said that there is, quote, a moral and an economic case for an overhaul of the system, adding that it would put the welfare system back on a more sustainable path. While some Labour backbenchers have voiced concerns over potential changes to the personal independence payment, the main disability benefit. We'll keep you updated on the Work and Pension Secretary's announcements throughout the day. The Ministry of Justice has confirmed to GB News today that it has triggered an emergency measure to use police cells to hold prisoners as jails in England and Wales reach capacity. A spokesman for the Ministry of Justice said this morning that the government had inherited a prison system in crisis. Operation Safeguard has now been triggered to what the government say help manage temporary capacity pressures. The government said they are working on 14,000 new prison places and that HMP Millsike will open in a few weeks' time. To the Middle East, where Hamas said a short time ago that communications with mediators on implementing a Gaza ceasefire deal are ongoing after Israel launched strikes on Gaza overnight. Palestinian health authorities have said that at least 326 people are dead and dozens injured. Strikes were reported in multiple locations across the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military said strikes would continue for as long as necessary and would extend beyond airstrikes, meaning Israeli ground troops could resume fighting. The news comes as Foreign Secretary David Lammy said yesterday that Israel had committed a breach of international law for the first time since the conflict began in Gaza. US President Donald Trump will speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin this afternoon in an attempt to convince his counterpart to accept a ceasefire in Russia's war with Ukraine. President Trump said he was looking forward to the call with the Russian president after he said there had been positive talks between Putin and US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. The White House said President Trump is willing to impose more sanctions on Russia if his phone call with Vladimir Putin does not go well. That comes as the European Union Foreign Affairs Chief is set to meet with David Lammy and John Healey today to discuss increasing economic pressure on Russia and supporting Ukraine. French riot police have begun a large-scale eviction of more than 400 migrants who have been occupying a theatre in central Paris. As officers began in the early hours of this morning, hundreds of demonstrators gathered to protest the eviction. Migrants have occupied the Gate Lyrique for more than 3 months. The King and Queen will meet Pope Francis during a royal tour of Italy in April, Buckingham Palace has confirmed. Their Majesties will carry out a state visit to the Holy See, the government of the Roman Catholic Church in the Vatican, despite the pontiff's continuing hospital treatment for double pneumonia. The tour will also include state visits to Rome and Ravenna. And the last surviving pilot who'd fought in the Battle of Britain, Group Captain John Paddy Hemingway, has died aged 105. Group Captain Hemingway passed away peacefully yesterday, the Royal Air Force said. He was part of the group known as the Few, who defended the UK from the large-scale assault by the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe. The RAF said Group Captain Hemingway's squadron shot down 90 enemy aircraft during an 11-day period in May 1940. The Prince of Wales has paid tribute to Mr Hemingway this morning, saying we owe so much to Paddy and his generation for our freedoms today. Their bravery and sacrifice will always be remembered. We shall never forget them. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Bev and Andrew.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev until midday. Thank you for getting in touch with us this morning. We're still recovering from the thrill of the Kemi Badenoch speech, aren't we?
Thrilling. She did it to create the fact they're setting up this policy review. They're going to go forward and start looking at policies because they need some policies. But she didn't even say, and if I was Prime Minister, I would rip up the net zero 2050 commitment. She just said, it's unobtainable.
Yes.
Well, get rid of it then.
Morning Norman, has said Kemi is full of bright ideas, but does she actually think that anyone believes this has been a party? They had 14 years and look what they've done to the country. They won't be trusted again. Saul says, Bevan Andrew, has this Labour government broken ground on any new prisons, or are we just going to hear about what they inherited from the Tory party for the next 4 painful years?
They're refurbishing some cells which have been abandoned in some prisons, but there's no plans for a new prison anywhere anytime soon.
Joanna says Kemi's manner is better when she's answering questions, but she's blinking a good deal, often a sign of stress, bless her. I said that, didn't I? She obviously looks like she's under massive pressure. She had to go and get a glass of water a few times. Her mouth seemed a bit dry. I thought she is going to feel the pressure. We've got the local elections around the corner. They will, to a large extent, be a reflection of her leadership. And if the Tories do badly in those local elections...
There'll be pressure for her to
She might be done for at that point. And then who would step into the breach?
Yeah.
Now then, let's keep on having a look at what you were saying here. Sam said, I think Kemi should do what Boris did and admit some responsibility for not building more power stations. She just came across as cold-hearted and know-it-all. We were commenting how much time she spent criticising the former Conservative government.
She did.
And then saying, well, I did ask for the evidence on this and I did ask for a report on that. Well, that doesn't go down well with people when you start blaming your own party.
However, in her defence today, we are talking about her. Because often we would go 2 weeks without talking about the leader of the opposition. And Piers Pothole was saying the other night, he was at a dinner the other night, everybody was talking about politics, nobody was talking about Kemi Badenoch, which is bad.
It is bad.
But then she's leader of the party, she's got 120 MPs in her party.
Carl said, someone has called the positive comments for Kemi caused by Tory trolls. I've never voted Conservative before. With Kemi as leader, I might. I'm sure other people, if they listen carefully, will feel the same. That's an interesting point, Carl. You think people maybe just switch off when she talks rather than actually listening to what she has to say? Well, that, unfortunately, is politics, and it is the challenge for her to capture the room. Whether she can do that or not, I don't know.
And the challenge for us is to make it relevant and interesting.
Yeah.
Now, we need to move on because you're a fan of Doctor Who, and I used to be. I've stopped watching it since. First of all, I didn't like that woman doctor very much.
How very sexist of you, Andrew.
No, I just didn't think she's very good. And now they've got a black gay Doctor Who. Of course they have, so I've given up on it completely. So Doctor Who and It's a Sin writer, Russell C.T. Davies, that was a brilliant series, by the way, about being gay in the 80s, has warned that gay people are in the greatest danger he's ever seen after Donald Trump's election.
He's also said that as a gay man, I feel like a wave of anger and violence and resentment is heading towards us on a vast scale.
So this morning we're asking, is the leader of the free world a threat to gay people? And who better to discuss this than Peter Tatchell, veteran human rights campaigner and friend of this programme, and the writer and broadcaster Lewis Oakley. Peter, I'm sure I know what you're going to say. Are you going to agree with Russell T Davies that we're all doomed now because of Donald Trump?
Well, I don't agree that Donald Trump is a direct threat to LGBT plus people here in Britain. But certainly there's an old adage which goes, when Washington sneezes, Britain catches a cold. And I think the rhetoric coming out of Donald Trump's White House certainly has emboldened some people, particularly in the Tories and Reform parties, to get tougher on LGBT plus issues, particularly regarding the trans community. Donald Trump has already rode back a lot of gains by LGBT plus people. So, for example, the cuts in US foreign aid have led to the closure of HIV projects all across the world, many of which are depended upon by gay and bisexual men to protect themselves against HIV. He's also banned over 250 words. He said these have to be removed from government documents and websites, and that includes the word LGBT, discrimination, prejudice, and bias. There are moves by pro-Trump Republicans to repeal same-sex marriage and also to repeal the bans on conversion therapy, the abusive practice to try and change someone's sexual orientation. So certainly what he's doing is creating a culture of fear in the United States. And there is an understandable concern that it might spread here to the UK.
But surely, Peter, taking trans women out of women's sport, which is one of the very first things he did, he surrounded himself by a crowd of women in the White House to show that he was supporting women. That's great for women. And in terms of getting rid of the LGBTQ plus language within government documents, he would say, I'm not interested in who you want to sleep with. I want everybody to be treated the same. How is that bad?
Well, when it comes to schools, Donald Trump is threatening to remove funding from any school that provides support to trans pupils. And even if you disagree with trans, it's absolutely clear that young children who have gender dysphoria need to be supported, not rejected. And to threaten to take away school funding for providing that care and compassion is pretty outrageous.
Let's bring in Lewis. Sorry to interrupt you, Peter, but I'm always conscious of time. Lewis, isn't part of the issue, therefore, that what the Trump government are doing is treating the trans issue as quite separate to the gay issue, and maybe that should be the case anyway.
Good.
Yeah, I think that the thing is that this whole kind of looking at Trump as the boogeyman, he's the bad man, he's just one person. I think it's a microcosm for what the feeling is. Let's not forget he won a pretty decent election with the popular vote, the swing states. So I think we have to take a step back and think, okay, well, why? Why would people vote for someone like Trump? And I think that we have to, and I do think, to Russell T. Davis's points, I think there has been a bit of a shift here, and I can sense it in myself now, because the pendulum swung so far one way, it's now swinging back, and people are trying to reassess where the line is. And I've even heard comments like people saying, oh, that's gay. And I thought to myself, oh, you wouldn't have, I feel like you wouldn't have said that a few years ago.
Nah.
But I do think, say again?
Surely not. It's not. People aren't using gay as a pejorative word because Donald Trump is in the White House.
I think you'd be surprised, because I think people think that things went so far one way, and then there's been this big political shift, and people are thinking, well, where's the line now? Can I get away with saying this? Can I get away with saying that? And we're seeing it in like companies rolling back their DEI stuff, being like, oh, well, good. We never really wanted to do this anyway.
That's good, because why do we need them to do that?
No, you know what? I don't disagree in sense of I'd rather not have companies pretending to like us just because they feel that they had to. If they really want to help us, then that's great for them. But I don't feel that I'd rather not have pretend people, pretend companies like, you know, supporting us. Just support us if you actually want to. But I do think, and one of the things I want to get to is that we have problems in our own house in this LGBT community. You know, it is divided, and we are divided over issues like free speech and how to campaign. And a lot of people, especially young people now, that reach out to me saying, you know, it feels like we've got away from talking about practical rights to now it's actually we're having ideological battles and we're alienating people. And I think we do need to take stock of that and think, look, how are we coming across here, and what can we do to really win hearts and minds, particularly in the media age now, where actually social media is geared towards outrage and protest. So if you're gay or bi and you're angry, you know, you get lots of likes for that. Whereas actually what we need is people willing to talk with people that disagree with them, win those conversations.
All right, Peter, gay men and women can get married, they can adopt children, they can have civil partnerships. None of that is under threat by anything that's happening in the United States. And as a gay guy like you are, who lived through the 80s, which were hateful at times, we had to put up with headlines like the gay plague. I think we live in we're lucky, we live in enlightened times, and I do not feel any of that is under threat.
Well, you're right. There has been huge progress, and I'd pay tribute to everyone, LGBT plus and straight allies, who've made that possible. But I would draw your attention to the fact that the reported incidence of homophobic, biphobic and transphobic hate crimes has increased in recent years, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years. There's been a big uptick in hate crimes. In our schools, we know that still nearly half of all LGBT plus kids get bullied at school because of their sexuality or their gender identity. And that, again, is very, very cruel to treat young kids in that way. So we have made great progress, but not the whole gambit. You know, there are still
some people have made great progress. I would say that bisexual people have not come very far, to be honest, and the majority of discrimination they receive are from gay men and LGBT groups that profess to be looking after LGBTQ people. Actually, despite bisexuals making up over half of that entire community, we receive about 1% of funding, and they don't actually do anything to really benefit bisexual people uniquely. It's really only the times where there's a crossover with being gay and being bi. Oh, we'll do something on that. So actually, I do think we always look at who's attacking us from the outside, but I think there are a lot of people now that are saying that the LGBT groups and movements is not helping me, and there's a lot of discrimination from within.
OK, thank you, gentlemen. I think we should leave on a positive note, which is that, of course, you've got Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, gay. March 2020, the first time in American history an openly LGBT person led the intelligence community under Trump. I think we have to look very much at what he does and who he appoints to set the role models, as opposed to necessarily just what he says. Thank you both so much. Really interesting conversation.
Peter Tatchell and Lewis Oakley.
Yeah.
Now, as Christians across the world observe Lent, she's not, we are bringing you daily reflections from ministers around the UK, and here is today's Lenten message.
The GB News Daily Reflection.
Hi, I'm Chris Tufnell, the vicar of Uterbridge Parish Church. A few years ago, I was in my parents' living room when I heard a clattering sound, and a bird fell down the chimney out of the fireplace and onto the floor. We looked at each other for a moment. I'm not sure who was more shocked. And then the bird went crazy, flapping all over the living room, spreading soot everywhere. I needed to use something to catch it, so I grabbed a towel that was lying nearby and used it like a net. But every time I got close, it clearly thought I was going to hurt it, so it flapped away. Until after a few minutes, I managed to catch it, took it to the door and let it fly away. I think many of us, when we hear about God, instantly think he's come to harm us or restrict us in some way, when the truth is, he's come to set us free. Jesus said, "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." And I can honestly say that the more I've let Jesus take hold of me and my life, the more I've trusted him, the more I've found that he has come to set me free.
I liked him.
That was very nice, wasn't it?
Nice little story.
And I love to see the priests when they wear their dog collars.
Smiley man.
It's Easter.
I thought it was great. Right, up next, you will not believe what parents in the American state of New Jersey are being asked to declare on a form about their babies when they are born in hospital. You really do not want to miss this. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
SpaceX latest Starship exploded over the Caribbean Sea.
I was wondering where it'd gone.
Yeah, debris could be seen falling back to Earth moments after the Starship launched down from Boca Chica, Texas. The rocket, of course, was unmanned. This was the 8th test flight, and it was only meant to be in the air for an hour. But, importantly, the booster for this rocket was caught with those Mechazilla chopsticks in an impressive display, the 3rd time that's happened.
Those Mechazilla chopsticks. This is Elon Musk's spaceship, isn't it?
Tell.
Starship, sorry.
Yeah.
Planetary scientist Andy Lound could tell us more about this. Andy, so was this a disaster or is this just a little obstacle to success?
Yeah, good morning. Par for the course, really. This is what kind of, good afternoon, par for the course as these things go on. The whole point of the tests, he's going to do 25 tests this year alone. And the interesting thing about this is you actually see the staging of it, where you've got the first stage, the booster, and then the second section, which is the ginormous rocket, which actually lifts off. The first stage, they seem to have got that cinched now, how it works quite well, coming back and landing in the chopsticks, absolutely breathtaking. The second stage, the Starship, was actually the new version of it, which they're testing out completely. And unfortunately, the first testing, the last test failed, and that was due to, it looks like, some frequency issues, which caused a frequency to go too high, which caused damage to the piping, which led to a fuel leak and a fire, which led to destruction. They made a lot of modifications, which led to test 8. And unfortunately, though, it has failed again. So they need to have a look at exactly what the issues are which are causing these failures.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
.24, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Brisbane. The panel are back, Nigel Nelson and Piers Pottinger. credit cards. Tell us about these government credit cards.
Yes, there were 20,000 of them being given to civil servants, pretty much to spend on what they liked, and the government have now frozen them, which is probably the right thing to do. I mean, it's very hard to justify these things. So, for instance, if you wanted to spend on hospitality, you were able to spend $2,500.
Amazing.
They've now brought that down to 500. I think the answer to this is there will be certain people who need them. I mean, especially people in foreign postings would probably actually need a credit card. You don't need 20,000 of them. It's quite clearly the right thing to do. Just give them to those who can make a really good business case of having them.
On one memorable occasion, Piers, we don't know who the diplomat was, but they spent £2,500 in an upmarket shoe shop in Barbados.
Yeah. I mean, the answer is these cards were clearly being abused by some and not properly monitored.
Yeah, I mean, somebody outside
they shouldn't actually have to freeze the whole thing.
No.
Because for a lot of the civil servants who are going about their normal business, this is a useful tool and something they should have. But because a handful, or many, I don't know, have abused it, it's all coming into, become a problem. Not as much of a problem, by the way, as the Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, who spent £250,000 on travelling around the world of first-class travel, even a private plane flying to Montserrat to promote the Houses of Parliament, for God's sake. I'm sorry. The Speaker, I rather liked Lindsay Hoyle, and I think it's very sad to see this profligacy and commissioning a portrait of himself to the tune of £50,000 which footed by the taxpayer.
Oh, it makes me sick.
I mean, at this time, when they're cutting and he was a Labour MP, of course, he's independent now as Speaker, but, I mean, for the Labour Party, on the one hand, to come in and start cutting welfare, which they're about to do, and then, on the other hand, to have the Speaker of the House spending money like water, flying around the world in a very profligate way. It is very... and of course, no MP can criticise him because they're very reluctant to criticise the Speaker.
You don't get caught.
Yeah, because then you don't get called and he takes it out on you. So there doesn't seem to be a mechanism for saying to Lindsay Hoyle, I mean, these civil servants have got to now justify their expenses.
Yes.
What about Lindsay Hoyle, I say?
Who's obviously felt like he could act with impunity. He probably wants the press on side,
I mean,
he's politicians on side.
And it's £250,000. I think it's in a period of less than 6 months.
Oh, it's disgusting.
It's absolutely
David Lammy,
staggering.
£650 on chandeliers. Apparently £4,100 spent on a swimming pool cleaning service. We have no idea who...
Must be a big swimming pool.
Who had a swimming pool that needed cleaning. It's completely reckless. Here we go. January 23, Foreign Office staff spent £920 at the Nassau Yacht Club in Barbados. They clearly have a great time there.
They're in their nice new shoes.
Must be. I mean, it's... What's the culture, Nigel? I'm so interested because I think this is across all parties, and I say all credit to Labour Party for reining this in now.
Yeah.
Who turns a blind eye in those situations? Because I'm sorry, but if I was paid by the taxpayer and I was at one of these swanky do's and someone handed me a pair of £400 heels from a shop in Barbados, I'd be saying, hang on. What's wrong with you all? Where's the conscience in this room?
And you're right.
No one's got the backbone, have they?
And you'd be right to do so. I mean, the reason they spent the money is because they can. And they shouldn't have been able to. So, obviously, these things are policed, but I think you find this in private... You find it also in private business.
That's fine.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, expenses abuse.
It's not necessarily fine. It's the idea that...
But it's not as bad as public money.
I don't care what private money's spent on.
Well, the point I'm making is that people get used to an expense regime, and what is allowed in certain places wouldn't be allowed in others, and you can be sort of profligate about the money. Now, that shouldn't happen in the civil service. I absolutely agree with you, but I think the same kind of psyche comes in. If they can get away with it, why not?
Well, I mean, I go back to what I said earlier. The thing is that what is clear is these cards were being abused and not properly monitored. And that's what needs to happen.
All
so
those
it's a
bureaucrats.
failure of administration rather than necessarily a culture of people. But it becomes a culture when people feel they can get away with it.
I really want to get this story because we've trailed it. Nigel, America, parents giving birth to their babies and being asked to declare what on a form?
Well, they'd be asked to declare their sexuality.
Of the baby?
Of the baby. This is why that...
Thank God for Donald Trump, because he'll put a stop to this.
I mean, the example is, which of the following best describes your baby? Lesbian or gay? Straight or heterosexual? Bisexual? Self-describes, please specify. I mean, it's difficult to know how a baby will actually communicate
not just be
that.
described as a baby.
But this is to a baby.
What about this?
No,
well, of course, this is insanity and is clearly madness. I mean, there's nothing else to say on it.
Which hospital is it?
Sorry? It's in New Jersey.
I'll tell you what it is. Oh, no, sorry, carry on while I look for it.
Hospitals in New Jersey, apparently, are doing this.
It's got to be stopped.
Well, of course. Well, I mean, apparently you don't have to answer it. So I'm sure they don't, because obviously it's rather hard to tell at a
I would imagine
newborn
it's very hard to tell
babe.
what your 4-year-old sexuality is.
Well, of course.
Frankly.
Yeah. I mean,
or 8-year-old.
And also, what business is it of the hospitals to know that? I'm sorry, I don't get
the
it.
only data I could see worth collecting is if you're asking parents how would you like your child to grow up, it would be useful data to see what the parents say. But beyond that, this is just ridiculous.
It really is ridiculous.
But the hospitals shouldn't be asking how they'd like their child to grow up anyway.
What, so because it might say I'd quite like my child to be gay?
Yeah, I mean, it may well be. I mean, if you were doing research, if the purpose of it was research, it is the only question I can see that might produce some interesting data.
And I just want us to be much less bothered about who people want to sleep with.
But,
anyway,
you know,
Nigel, we've got to move on, guys. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry, Nigel and Piers. Katie Bone is waiting very patiently with your news. Here she is.
Bev, Andrew, thank you. Your top stories this hour. Speaking a short while ago, Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch said that her party is not creating a legacy and that the UK is becoming weaker through complacency as she launched a policy renewal programme. Ms Badenoch said that her party must develop credible plans based on Conservative values as she labelled net zero by 2050 as impossible, adding that the target to reach net zero emissions by that time cannot be achieved without a drop in living standards. The government is set to unveil major welfare reforms today, with restrictions on some sickness and disability benefits to be announced. Reports suggest that Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall could slash £5 billion of welfare payments. Downing Street has said that there is, quote, a moral and an economic case for an overhaul of the system, adding that it would put the welfare system back on a more sustainable path. Well, some Labour backbenchers have voiced concerns over potential changes to the personal independence payment, the main disability benefit. We'll keep you updated on the Work and Pension Secretary's announcements throughout the day. To the Middle East, where Hamas said a short time ago that communications with mediators on implementing a Gaza ceasefire deal are ongoing after Israel launched strikes on Gaza overnight. Palestinian health authorities have said that at least 400 people are now dead and dozens injured. Strikes were reported in multiple locations across the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military said strikes would continue for as long as necessary and would extend beyond airstrikes, meaning Israeli ground troops could resume fighting. The news comes as Foreign Secretary David Lammy said yesterday that Israel had committed a breach of international law for the first time since the conflict began in Gaza. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2990 and €1.1878. The price of gold is £2,329.58 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,712 points.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
we're going to cross live to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who's at the launch of Kemi Badenoch's policy renewal speech. I think he's with the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel. Chris.
Andrew and Bev, that's right. Yeah, we heard this 4 months into Kemi Badenoch as leader of the party. She's now set out her plans, policies that we've been waiting for a while now. What a big one, though, today is her saying that net zero by 2050, that's cutting emissions by 2050, is now impossible. She wants to review that target. She also set out plans for her shadow cabinet to review all sorts of other policy areas, lawfare and others too. And I asked her a question that GB News viewers are worried about, which is her commitment to the pensions triple lock, and also about the possibility of British troops on the ground in Ukraine. And here's what she told us moments ago.
Thank you, Kemi Badenoch. There's been some reporting that you may be doubting your commitment to the pension triple lock at the next election. That wasn't mentioned in your list there of things you're looking at. Can you confirm here and now you will maintain the pension triple lock if you win in the next election? And I've asked a quick second one about Ukraine. There is concern about our commitment to Ukraine amongst GB News viewers. Should MPs get a vote before we deploy British troops on the ground?
I think that on Ukraine, that's relatively easy. We should have a consensus across Parliament on this. This is a very significant decision. It's taking us to war. On the first question, I've said repeatedly that the Conservative Party policy is to maintain the triple lock. When we are changing policy, I will stand on a stage like this and I will announce that we're changing policy. Until then, the policy stays the same. Thank you. Aubrey Allegretti from The Times.
Hello. You've reiterated your belief in man-made climate change and suggested that we should improve how we tackle it. Do you think that that is best done on an industrial...
Badenoch there with she wants consensus across the House of Commons in terms of British troops on the ground in Ukraine. With me now is Dame Priti Patel, the party's shadow foreign secretary. Dame Priti, on Ukraine, do you want to see a vote of MPs before we deploy troops there?
Well, you heard Kemi say that effectively today, but I was in Parliament yesterday putting direct questions to David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, who's still unable to give us any more information about troop deployment, a timetable, even what this operational phase consists of. So we're asking the questions. We have been told that military planners will be meeting this week, but you know, of course, much hinges upon the discussions that take place between America and Ukraine as well, because that has moved to a certain extent, but also between the United States and Russia, which we understand there'll be more movement today. I think it's absolutely right. Look, I'll be very clear and candid about this. We will be asking the questions of the government. We think it's too premature right now to be making big commitments. We've heard a lot about the coalition of the willing. We hear that more countries want to join, but we know nothing as of yet about what deployment would look like, what it would consist of, you know, how our armed forces will be protected, how long we'll be there, when this deployment could happen. We need answers to many of these questions, Christopher, before we do anything else.
Later today, President Trump talked with Vladimir Putin on the phone. One big question raised by MPs already is, can UK troops fire back if fired upon?
Well, we don't know any of this, and I don't even want to speculate right now. As I said, I put a range of questions to the government yesterday. We've not had any answers. So, you know, there's a lot of road to cover yet. We need to put the questions to the government. They need to be honest and upfront and, you know, transparent about this. You heard Kemi say that this should come to a vote in Parliament. That means a full discussion and debate about this. We don't want to put our amazing armed forces, our servicemen and women, personnel in harm's way. We need to have full transparency as to what this would consist of. This is the stage that we're at. We need answers to many of our questions right now, and we're not getting them.
You were in the audience there for Kemi Badenoch's announcement about the policy review. The big news here is that the Tory party is no longer the party of the environment. Is that right? Are you comfortable with that?
That's not correct. That is not what you heard, Chopper, and you were there as well. Kemi quite rightly spoke of the level of questioning and scrutiny that we need to be providing around arbitrary targets. What we discussed today, you heard, was this arbitrary target of 2050 and net zero, not the plans as to how to get there. And of course, this is successive governments have failed to attribute and deliver plans. And we hear Ed Miliband say all sorts of spurious remarks, comments around 2050, but not recognising, and this is really important, the cost to your viewers. the cost to the taxpayer and what this effectively means. You know, I want to see more technology when it comes to the development of green initiatives. We've seen that. Britain is very successful on renewables. I've been on GB News so many times and spoken about this in the past as well. Technology is one thing. Taxes, no, not without a plan and not even thinking about, which is what we've seen for too long under Ed Miliband and certainly this government as well. All they're doing is layer a cake of more taxes on British taxpayers, and that is not acceptable.
So vote Tory and the coalfields get opened again.
So you vote Conservative, and we're a long way away from this right now because today was also about policy renewal. So let's come back to that. We are being thoughtful, we are being considered, we're understanding the fact that officers, custodians, not just of the Conservative Party, but of the country, we have to have future policies and a future plan that, guess what, can be delivered for the British people, that speaks to their hopes and aspirations, is thought out and thoughtful. You know, it isn't just going to be work in progress with a never-ending sort of bill on British taxpayers, which is what we have seen too much of. And in that sort of very Conservative Thatcherite mould, we are being very honest and very open about the challenges we face, but also the direction of travel of our party.
Just finally, Jane Patel, are you worried, though, that this will be seen as an appeal to reform UK voters and you leave the left of the party open to Lib Dems to take support from there? You're meant to be a coalition.
Ridiculous statements, and I don't mean that in a rude or disparaging way. We're taking a thoughtful approach in terms of how we develop policy. Today was about net zero. We are not carry on with this arbitrary target of 2050 without any substance. Second to that, government has been dominated, British politics has been dominated for too long by activists rather than the right people that understand how to deliver for our country. You also heard, I think you may have asked a question about lawfare, about migration, by that illegal migration, something that I have experienced myself. Lawyers just constantly thwarting the ability of an elected government through our own legislation to implement our legislation and bring in and enact our own laws. These are the hard truths and facts that we need to be confronting if we are going to deliver for your wonderful viewers and for the British people.
Jane Patel, thank you, and thank you for telling me off there slightly about my questions, but I like that too. There you have it, the Tory party on the front foot there, punching out from where their position was in that crouch after the election last July, with a big statement here: net zero in 2050 could be on the way out. Back to you.
All right, that's a scolded Chris Hope, our political editor. Up at noon, good afternoon with Tom and Emily. What's coming up, guys?
Well, there are a couple of live events, of course. We're going to be hearing what the government is going to do about benefits in around half an hour into the show.
Yeah.
Liz Kendall standing up in the House of Commons. Apparently £6 billion of cuts, but where will they come?
Yes, please don't say slashing benefits, because the benefits bill is going to be nearly 100 billion soon. It's not slashing, it's just cutting it a bit.
Just totally unsustainable. I wonder how much they're going to water down what's sort of been revealed to the press up till this point. But finally, we will actually find out. There's also a couple of bizarre stories, adventure stories, yes, we're calling them. These South African scientists, a research team, found themselves in a very remote location in northern Antarctica, as you do, doing very important research, I'm sure, although we don't actually know what they're doing there. Apparently, one of the guys there, one of the researchers, has gone a little bit mad, and he's been accused of sexually assaulting someone, of abuse, of all sorts, threatening to kill someone. So all these researchers stuck in this remote locations where no one can save them, really, for another 2 weeks, with a madman or...
My take on it is slightly different, isn't it?
Are they snowflakes, Bev?
I think it's a team of snowflakes. They're all moaning. We don't like him. He's not a team player. You need to come and rescue us.
Well, there's a mystery here, because all we know is this was reported in the South African press.
Yeah.
A desperate email was sent to the South African government basically saying help from some of these people on this research base, 10 of them in total, alleging all of these things of this one member. But we as journalists don't know who the 10 people are, don't know who the one accused is, and if anyone wants to get to them to help, it's a 2-week journey from the southernmost tip of South Africa to the northernmost tip of Antarctica.
And tell us, are you going to have anything on Prince Harry?
We are, because his secret visa files may well be published today.
In the United States?
Revealed in the United States today.
Did he lie about his drug taking or not?
Did he lie about his drug taking? I mean, there was lots of talk, wasn't there, about whether Donald Trump might deport him.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bonkers story on one part, because we know how many British musicians have been involved in sex, drug and rock and roll, and also merrily live in California.
Good
not,
point.
Not casting any specific assertions, of course, but it does seem that in the United States it's one rule for some and a different rule for everyone else.
Because you're right, by law he should be kicked out if he's lied on his application form.
Yeah, but he did flaunt his drug taking in his book.
Unless he lied in his book.
Do you remember what...
Unless he lied in his book.
Unless he lied in his book. I don't think he lied in his book.
But, of course, when Donald Trump was asked about this, he said, I'm not going to kick him out. He's got enough problems being married to
That's true, yes. He's got enough problems.
Didn't he say she was gassy? And he's right, she is.
Emily and Tom from Midday. Up next, the King and Queen are still planning to meet Pope Francis in the Vatican when they travel to Italy next month. We'll have all you need to know about their trip. But first, some winter song with the European holiday destinations.
Do you think the Pope wants to see the King and Queen? I mean, he's a very sick man. Probably the last thing he wants is those two sticking their head around the door. Cooey, how are you, Mr. Pope? He's not very well.
The representative of a church that's split from Rome.
Yeah.
It's the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Plenty of sunshine through the middle of the week for Italy and Croatia. Some chilly winds blowing across Greece and Turkey. Strong winds and more rain to come for Spain and Portugal. Some places here could see a month's worth of rain over the next day or so. Some of that showery rain affecting the Pyrenees and the south of France. Much of Italy dry and sunny. Plenty of sunshine over the Greek islands, but that northerly wind will be bringing a chill. But temperatures will be recovering slowly in Santorini over the next few days.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A dry and, for most of us, sunny day to come. Feeling warm out of the wind in the increasingly strong March sunshine, but the wind still has a cold feel to it. It's coming from the southeast, and it's that wind that has cleared the cloud overnight for most of us. However, the cloud continues to persist across parts of Northern Ireland, particularly towards the north and the west, and a few patches of cloud also for the Western Isles and the Northern Isles. Otherwise, it's more or less a sunny day for the vast majority. Yeah, it will be breezy across the south and the southwest in particular, and the wind will feel cold, particularly around North Sea coast. But temperatures a little higher compared with yesterday, highs of 10 to 12 Celsius, 13 perhaps across parts of West Wales. Into the evening, under those clear skies and with the wind easing for a time inland, temperatures will fall away once the sun goes down. So we're looking at, again, a clear night to come, but with those temperatures falling. And for parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland, Northern England, well, through the course of the night, we are likely to see some mist patches form. But for the vast majority, it's simply a clear night. There'll be one or two patches of cloud towards the southwest and the far north, and we keep that breeze going across the far south and southwest. That's going to prevent a frost across some southern and southwestern counties as we start off Wednesday. Otherwise, it's a widespread frost up and down the country. Temperatures widely -1, -2 Celsius, but in some shelter spots of northern UK, -5 to -9 degrees first thing. So a very chilly start to the day, but it will soon warm up, and by 8 or 9 a.m, the frost disappears. Widespread sunshine once again, and those temperatures will continue to climb because we've got this southerly airflow by Wednesday afternoon. It's going to be relatively warm, temperatures reaching 16, 17, perhaps even 18 Celsius across some southern areas.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Have you sprung into action yet with our spring giveaway? It's your chance to win a fabulous designer handbag, designer watches and £17,777 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like.
It's an amazing package. It could be yours, and here's how you could win it.
Spring has sprung with a great British giveaway, and we're giving you the chance to splash out this season with an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash. Jet off on your dream holiday, treat yourself to something special, or just save it for a rainy day. You'll also receive 2 brand new designer watches and a Mulberry handbag, so you can really look the part this spring. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Buckingham Palace is pressing ahead with plans for the King and Queen to visit Rome as Pope Francis recovers from pneumonia when they travel to Italy next month.
GBNews royal correspondent Cameron Walker's with us. Are you going with them?
I am, indeed, yes. We will be covering it for GB News, but huge question mark because, of course, the Pope's still in hospital, isn't he? And he wasn't... Look, he's incredibly sick. He's got pneumonia, still battling pneumonia. I've spoken to...
Which is very dangerous for a man of 88.
It is.
He's only got 1.5 lungs.
And he did, because he lost half it when he was 21 years old, so he wasn't good to start with. However, the Vatican did release a photograph of him in the hospital over the weekend in the chapel.
I thought he looked terrible.
Well, quite. But royal sources are insisting that they are in regular... So this was released by the Vatican over the weekend. This is Pope Francis inside the Hospital Gemelli in Rome in the chapel of the hospital. This is the first photograph released since he went into hospital. Royal sources say they are in daily contact with the Vatican over whether this visit can go ahead, and they also insist that the outlook for the Pope remains positive. So they are pushing ahead with plans for King Charles and Queen Camilla to visit the Holy See.
If he's still in hospital, will they visit him in hospital or not?
So I pressed them on this particular issue, and the impression I'm getting is they certainly have a plan B and C, but they are not telling us what those plans are. It's not going to be the first time, if he is still in hospital, that they've had to rearrange a state visit last minute. If you remember a couple of years ago with those dreadful riots in France, the King had to, President Macron had to very embarrassing ask the King to postpone the state visit. So Buckingham Palace can rearrange things last minute, but of course, it's not just the Vatican, it's the Italian state visit that's going to be happening at the same time, so it's 2 for the price of 1. And it's the British government, as we know, that requests the King to travel on these state visits. He'll be having an audience with Prime Minister Meloni. Of course, she was here a couple of weeks ago for the security conference.
And she gets on quite well with the Prime Minister Starmer, although she's not backing his plans for troops on the ground in Ukraine.
No, but of course, similarly with President Trump, Prime Minister Meloni will respect King Charles as the head of state of Britain, and that is the Trump card, isn't it? It's all about that soft power of diplomacy, strengthening relations between the two nations, and of course, at a time where Russian aggression perhaps is ramping up a little bit, 2 NATO allies, the UK and Italy, is going to be on full display. We're going to be having a joint military demonstration, a flypast by the Royal Air Force and Italian Air Force, which will be pretty symbolic.
Just very briefly, Cameron, because Emily and Tom are waiting to come on. Prince Harry, we're going to get to see his application visa to America. If it says on there, did you take drugs? Tick the box. No, I didn't. And we know he did from Spare. What happens then,
Well, I think it's
Cameron?
an offence to lie on an immigration form, isn't
Well, it depends which visa he's got. Right. So there's a visa called an A1 visa, which is for heads of state or royalty or things like that, which could potentially give him not quite a get-out-of-jail-free card, excuse the pun, but he could, well, be deported. He may not be. President Trump is saying he won't be, so we'll have to wait and see what's on there.
If he's deported back to Britain, could he please leave his wife in America?
Oh, Andrew.
I just don't think it will happen. I think
they
he will stay in the US.
Trump did say, actually, he's got no interest in deporting him, because if you remember, he said he's got enough on his plate already.
Well, he's flip-flopped, because he spoke to GB News and and said...
Cameron, always lovely to see you. No doubt we'll talk to you tomorrow about that.
Harry, big story.
That's it from us for today. Good afternoon, Britain, next with Tom and Emily. See you tomorrow.
Absolutely it is. And in about a half an hour or so, we're going to find out which benefits at last will be cut by this Labour government. Will you be affected?
That's right, on our feet in the House of Commons in just a half an hour's time. But also, the Conservatives, are they really abandoning net zero? And will those trapped astronauts in space make it home safe? All to come after your weather forecast.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Cracking day today if you like spring sunshine. It will still feel quite fresh, certainly a chilly start, particularly in the wind in the southwest. There'll be another frost overnight tonight. Quite cloudy to begin with across parts of Northern Ireland and some cloud across the southwest, but for many it is a sparkling day of sunshine. A brisk wind though across the southwest of England, South Wales, and quite a breeze too on some of these North Sea coasts, which could produce quite cloudy conditions across Shetland. But for most it's fine, dry, lots of sunshine. Temperatures just ticking up a little, double digits for many inland, but it'll feel cooler on those North Sea coasts, just 7 or 8 Celsius here. Pretty quickly tonight those temperatures will be dropping back down again under largely clear skies. We'll keep a fair bit of cloud and a bit of a breeze across Shetlands, but elsewhere we will have generally clear skies well into the night, and that will allow those temperatures to start falling pretty rapidly. But generally a fine night to come, a good night for stargazing across the Midlands, Wales and southwest England. Still a bit of a breeze across the southwest. That will ease slowly through the night, but will still be there. Temperatures will fall away under those clear skies, as I mentioned, so you can see that blue hue, the frost. The breeze in the southwest should help to keep the temperatures up here, but elsewhere we'll be down to freezing or a touch below, even in towns and cities and rural spots well below, -6, -7 in a few places. So a frosty start tomorrow morning. But again, for many, it's going to be a fine and dry day with plenty of sunshine. Perhaps a bit more cloud tomorrow, particularly in the far southwest, where the winds will be a touch lighter, but it's just a small chance of a shower here. Again, the risk of a bit of low cloud at times over the Northern Isles, but generally it's another fine day tomorrow with more blue sky. And after that frosty start, turning a little milder, and temperature will continue to tick up through the rest of this week.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be the next big winner of the Great British Giveaway, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. Cash that you'll be able to spend on anything you like. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag, and not one, but 2 sought-after designer watches, so you can style it out this spring. For another chance to win the